I've been a teacher of the fine arts for about 33 years now, and part of that philosophy when I'm dealing with my students is to bring that language that we all share as artisans into the conversation between two people about the product and the medium they're working in. And in order to have that conversation, we all have to have a common language, whether you're a metalsmith, a potter, whether you're a sculptor, whether you do block prints, or whether we're in polymer. And in order for us to talk to a ceramic artist, we need to have the conversation about, I use a slab roller, for instance. They don't use pasta machines, even though it's the exact same tool. So for me, I would prefer calling it a slab roller, because we all, in my media of polymer, we use slabs of clay, and I'm not making pasta. So when I have a conversation with a fellow potter about a glaze, and we're talking about what I do in my professional life, I work in slabs of polymer. So I can have a conversation because they work in slabs of clay. And I can talk about I work on a much smaller slab roller than my big Brentwood that I have in my studio at school. Same principle, same philosophy, same ideology. I've heard a couple years ago, someone talked about a surface treatment as icing. And to me, I was taken aback a bit, because I consider any topical treatment that looks like icing to be considered slip. And slip has many forms if you're a potter. It's a decorative surface, it's an adhesive, and it's a way you also produce another duplicate of the original. So those are the kind of conversations that I would like to have changed, that if you're going to talk about icing, what are you really using it for? Is it an adhesive?
Right. Or are you eating it?
Are you eating it? Right. And we don't eat our polymer clay.
Yeah.
We can use it as a decorative element to create texture and movement and balance and to pop color through those elements. But we're not eating it.
Yeah.
Okay, so another example I was thinking of towards the end of the class when we were doing a critique, which I firmly believe we as artisans should have those conversations together as well, about form and function and the movement of the piece, how you move from one side to the other, and how we get there in our designs. And as we move through that project, it changes as well. When we got to the critique part, several of the students who just amazing boxes to begin with, blew my socks off, way past my expectations, but started to go away from more of a fine arts conversation and started having a conversation about a box, starting to take on the personalities of, say, a flower, or say a pregnant woman. It looks like a pregnant woman. It looks like a guitar. It looks like something else that the box was not meant to be. So we had the conversation about not putting an object in a category and in a box where it will stay forever. Instead, talking about that box in terms of the elements and the principles of design, where we're talking about the balance and the movement and the curve and how something on an angle complements or the direction of a movement of a simple thing as a sanding brick and helps you move around that form to a different place. So those are the kinds of interruptions to pull us back into the form of really dealing with just the pure form of it.
But you have a wonderful way, and everybody got it and was speaking in this syncopated patter by the end of the
class.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about the surface of a box, and you want us to focus in a certain area, and you have larger shapes, and then you continue moving through that form with smaller, more isolated forms, so that the conversation becomes wider between the shapes till it almost becomes isolated. You may have a conversation about boop 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 boop. So that's what Cynthia is talking about, is my conversation and taking shapes and turning them into lyrical terms. So if you're looking at a picket fence, it's because it's the exact same shape and size, and it's predictable. Yeah. So if you have larger forms or brighter, intense colors, they're going to come get you and speak to you louder.
How did you develop this talent for? It's like a jazz singer.
That's the way I see the world. So it's just my point of view and how I interpret things around me. I think you're right. Then everybody started going, boop, boop. What do you think? Doo, 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 doo. You know, you hear these little things throughout the classroom, which was really wonderful.
Yeah, you make it sound so academic at first. You know, we're talking about form and function.
Right.
And then it devolved down to beep, 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 beep.
Which is part of it, because little sounds are little.
Yeah.
And they make a little sound visually to us.
Yeah.
And that's what our eye is transmitting back. If you're scientifically, if you're going to get into frequency and the waves are softer or larger. And that's kind of the way I think we react to those shapes and those forms. Either they're supportive actors in the cast, or they're the actors.
And you talked about stop signs.
Stop signs. Yeah, and we do it all the time in so many different ways, I think, to stop that movement around whatever we're trying to get into. I think one of the forms we talked about, beautiful movement on the outside and pattern on the surfaces. And even such a simple thing as where to put a base, because the form was tilted, so it wasn't sitting symmetrically on the base of a tabletop. And she made it asymmetrical, so she needed something here to help stabilize it as far as the form goes, and the function of the piece, so it was balanced. But she was going to put a handle directly on the other side of the form, and like implied lines. If you're talking in terms of elements and principles, your eye automatically wants to connect that, so you could actually cut that form in half and create a barrier or a stop sign. Or if you're having a form that moves up like this, if you have a line across this that's a different color, it speaks bigger, a bigger shape, it's going to stop you right there instead of continuing the movement upwards. Yakabouts and walkabouts.
Yeah.
And I think all those things promote the conversation and the freedom to talk to someone different that you've never ever spoken to. We had doll makers there who were fabulous. And you were talking about they're a different genre and they think differently. And they do, and it's totally acceptable. But we still had that common conversation about placement, about movement, about visual weight, that we all share, no matter what genre or what background we come from. And I think those kinds of conversations led to the security of like, wow, I can talk, I think that the kids have changed me in the way I respond to their world, because their world, for me, has as a whole. It's transformed totally on how they communicate, how they sit and process information.
Really?
Yeah, it is a very electronic world, and I find it's very isolating sometimes because they don't have to think anymore. They do not have to process anymore because everything is right here in front of them.
And we're pretty much hooked into our devices, I say, as I video you on my phone.
And I think we have to. If we're not, we're going to be dinosaurs. I know that's my biggest fear in retiring in a year, is becoming a dinosaur so quickly, because I'm not going to understand the latest form of communication between two people that aren't in the same room, or a lot of times in the same room. Kids are having conversations and they don't barely have to talk to each other. And that's the way I see life, is we all start with those scraps of pieces of things and parts of things, and some stuff we like, some stuff we don't like, but in the end, hopefully we end up in that happy place, that we're ending up with happiness, and no matter what direction or little journey we're on till we get to that point, and hopefully that's a happy thing that we're working towards. So I think that's kind of where my happiness comes in.
So you want to keep that constant in the classroom, really, as a constant,
positive, happy, joyful, moving forward, and looking to see, okay, what's the next step? How successful was I at this? And even to the point where I feel like all those mistakes we make, they're not mistakes. And that's, I think we talked about that I don't want to hear, I didn't say I don't want to hear, you want to encourage them to be understanding that mistakes are fabulous, fabulous things, that they are part of that journey, and they will teach you, if you listen to them, they will teach you where to go next.